We're talking about sex in the Boundary Waters.
Yeah, or the wilderness. Or,
Sexuality.
Or in this case, sex in general into a microphone that people are going to hear about.
For me, I really enjoy talking about sex and sexuality, especially in a place that's really special to me, like the Boundary Waters or the wilderness. But it feels like something I like to talk about just with my partner or my close friends and people, and not something that I am used to sharing with the world or necessarily like to, because it is private, and I think that makes it special.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Paddle and Portage podcast. This is M. Baxley.
I'm Joe Fredericks.
As you heard from the voice of Anna Hennessy, today's episode covers some vulnerable, deeply personal topics around sex and sexuality in the wild places, including the Boundary Waters.
And with that in mind, it might not be the right time to listen to this episode. Maybe the people around you at this particular moment aren't ready to hear something like this, or you yourself need some time to just find a better opportunity to listen to this episode. That's all good. Come revisit it when you're ready, when the time's appropriate, and we'll give you a minute to do that while we give a shout out to our sponsors who are supporting this episode, including our friend Peta Barrett over in Ely.
Enjoy this episode of Paddle and Portage, brought to you by Women's Wilderness Discovery in Ely, Minnesota, gateway to the Boundary Waters. Experience canoe country in all seasons with our outfitted guided trips and workshops. Visit us online at womenswildernessdiscovery.com, Instagram, and Facebook. Discover your inner strength outdoors.
Also supporting Paddle and Portage, Ely Outfitting Company. Located in downtown Ely, their friendly and knowledgeable team shares expert Boundary Waters trip planning and routing advice. Ely Outfitting Company offers complete outfitting services, lightweight canoe rentals, and professionally guided tours. Now booking 2024 canoe trips? Plan your Boundary Waters trip now at EelyOutfittingCompany.com. Successful Boundary Waters canoe trips starts with Ely Outfitting Company.
And support for this episode also comes from Sawtooth Outfitters. They're located on Highway 61 in Tofty, and whether it's your first trip or you're an experienced paddler, they're here to help you outfit with the right gear, and they have the knowledge to ensure that you'll have an unforgettable trip. They have ultralight canoe rentals and outdoor gear, stocked clothing, gear, maps, souvenirs, all kinds of things. They're in Tofty, as I said, and it's not too late to start your Boundary Waters trip for this summer or fall. You can find them at sawtoothoutfitters.com or give them a call today.
Freddie, you and I have been noodling this episode for some time now.
Sex in the Boundary Waters.
You and I have been traveling into the Boundary Waters for many years, and the topic in our friendship has come up. Our own experiences of being sexual beings in the place that we love is something we've talked about often.
Right. Does that make us weirdos?
Well, that's the question, right? You know, because nobody talks about this, at least not openly, and you can't search sex in the Boundary Waters and find information on what people are thinking about this, what people's experiences are, how they feel in this place, and it makes it hard to figure out if you're alone in your own experiences.
Right, even though it's something presumably, at least based on our multiple abundant conversations on this topic, that we wondered if other people thought about it, if they had these types of experiences that we cherish, quite frankly.
And that launched us into starting to create this episode, and it was the most interesting experience to reach out to friends and even acquaintances and broach the subject. And I certainly found that people were willing to entertain the idea. They were very excited that we were going to produce an episode about this, and even people shared some of their own experiences. But as soon as I asked, would you come on the episode? oof, there was a total mood change. Did you experience that too?
Right. It's always, I've had some of that in the past with maybe a political issue or something where, hey, you're really demonstrating a lot of enthusiasm about this particular topic that we're discussing. You pull out the recording equipment or the notepad to document that. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yes.
Not for public record here.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm really grateful and proud that we have a whole cast of very experienced Boundary Waters travelers that decided to take the leap and dive into this topic.
And we'll be hearing from Anna Hennessy throughout the episode, who we heard from at the top. But let's jump into part of our conversation with two very experienced Boundary Waters paddlers, Dave and Amy Freeman, talking about their year in the wilderness. They spent an entire year inside the Boundary Waters.
Well, not just that. Their majority of their married life, at least especially their early married life, I think in their first 3 years, it was hundreds and hundreds of days in backcountry wilderness experiences. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, they were willing to talk about it.
Certainly no reporter would ask a question like that. No, I really don't remember like anyone. I mean, maybe it's different for Amy, but I don't remember that, like friends or anybody ever asking about it. I don't think it's harder to have sex in the wilderness than it is at a house for the most part. I mean, you know, in some ways it's easier because you don't generally have as many like distractions or other commitments or things like that, you know? So, I mean, I guess once you get over, or once you sort of figure out good methods for cleanliness and things like that, it's no big deal.
And Dave and Amy, obviously, no one ever asked them, but they were willing to share. And the thing about sex and sexuality is, like Anna said in the beginning, it can be really private, and everybody has sort of their own unique experience of it, even though it's universal, right? Mm-hmm. But I really appreciate Emily Ford sharing her experience on this, having spent endless time in the wilderness in the winter time. Emily skied with her dog Diggins from the west end of the Boundary Waters to the east end of the Boundary Waters a few years back, and had ample time alone in the backcountry in the winter. And not only is that sort of a unique thing to Emily, but her entire life leading up to that shaped her own experience of sex and sexuality. She talks about that.
I think I might come at it from a different direction of like for somebody who didn't come out till much later in life, like it's kind of just fun to chit chat about like what and how people are doing things. And like, it's kind of a whole new adventure that I personally get to explore, and like to really hear from anybody, like how their sex life is going, and ask questions too. And because I didn't get that when I was like, when kids and teens were like doing the whole thing in the back seat, I was like, I was playing with my Legos. So now as an adult, I'm like, what are you getting up to? I have a neighbor next door here, and a lot of our friendship has been based off of like his sex life and how he does it. He's actually paraplegic from the belly button down, and so like we talk ad nauseum about sex and what that looks like for him as a dude with no legs or no feeling below the belly button, and me as a queer woman who came into that much later in life. So I think it's kind of fun to talk about in a bedroom or in the wilderness, wherever, I guess.
Okay. So here's what's going on in the episode. We're lifting the curtain on the fact people have sex in the Boundary Waters and other wild places. Like, it's a thing. It happens. and we're finally talking about it. What about you?
Well, yeah, yes. Yes.
Wait, is this one of those things where now it's tell us about it and then, whoa, no.
Well, yeah, it's deeply personal, very special, and I'm definitely willing to share. And that's the thing about the wilderness is it can be a very sensual place, and it can also be a very foreboding place. So on a beautiful summer's day in the wilderness, where the sun is shining, I think of a memory on Winchell Lake, where it was a slow trip, not covering a lot of ground, but just spending a lot of time. And I was sitting at camp on the south shore of Winchell, heard running water coming down that steep ridge on the north side of Winchell, and wanted to go over and figure out if there's a waterfall. Went over with my partner, my romantic partner at the time, and we tasked to finding our way up this ridge, following these pools and dropping waterfalls all the way up to the top of the ridge where the waterfall originated. Stunning day, all these beautifully sensual elements of warmth and sun and moving water, and the exhilaration of getting up to that spot and exploring was all this connecting experience. And right up there, I think it started with I was so excited I just stripped all my clothes off, because being naked's great, right? And then, one thing led to another, and we had this beautiful romantic sexual encounter up there, and I'll never forget that. It was beautiful.
Amy Freeman gets to some of what you're describing about a lot of different sensory overload or connection to scent, sound, sight, and associating that with having sex in the Boundary Waters. During the year in the wilderness on Knife Lake, which was Dave and Amy's favorite lake, they spent the freeze up there, and Amy tells us about some of those sensory connections.
It's so neat how memory is, it's not just remembering the visual and the emotional, but it's also the sounds and the smells, and so it's the smell of red pine needles and the duff. And it was a time when loons were gathering to head south, and then as time progressed they were gone, and it was pretty darn quiet out there, but still squirrels going nuts, stashing food, so a lot of chattering, and even the ice as it started to form, the crazy sounds ice can make. You're forming a memory of not just the act, but also everything that was going on around you with all your senses.
The theme of the sensory elements of the wilderness, the spaciousness of being out there, is something that both Emily and Anna talked about extensively too, and that there's something unique about a certain type of trip that can really set the stage for intimacy and vulnerability.
For me, yes, definitely. I think I feel most myself when in the Boundary Waters or a setting similar, and I have all the layers kind of stripped down, and you just get a real raw version of Anna, which I think creates a lot of intimacy, not necessarily even sexual, with the person or people that I'm traveling with. And that is really special to me, and that is something that keeps me coming back to these remote places, is seeking out that intimacy with other people. It's not necessarily sexual, but yeah, when I'm out there with Emily, for sure, I think that level of comfort and rawness and like feeling truly myself lends itself really well to sexual intimacy as well.
I think for the times we've been out in the wilderness together is the time where we have probably explored some of the most sexually between the two of us. And sometimes I wonder if it's just because we have the time to do so. Like, it's just kind of endless hours where you're just there on an island. I think maybe we could disclose that we also have 4 dogs that experience this with us in a way, but we also have they're our only responsibility, And then the other part is it because that we can be a little more vulnerable. But I think the time factor, like for me especially, like Anna knows this about me, I am the worst. I'm not a great sex partner when I'm stressed. I'm not really present or anything. But when you're out in the wilderness, when I'm out in the wilderness, there's just nothing else to do. At least the way that we've been traveling. We haven't really been trying to scurry across anywhere, like on any expeditions. We just kind of take our time and enjoy what's around us, and that makes for a really easy, intimate setting to explore.
Just like those words, we will both take flight.
Freddie, you talked to actual professional, certified sex therapist, practicing marriage and family therapist, Erin Peterson, on this very topic.
Erin's from right here in Minnesota, goes to the Boundary Waters periodically, and seemed a perfect fit. Certified sex therapist, person who goes to the Boundary Waters. We're producing this episode called Sex on the Boundary Waters. What can you help us understand about this and why the Boundary Waters, a wild place, a campsite, why that might be conducive to romantic feelings and even lust and passion? Here's what Erin had to say.
I think that going to the Boundary Waters or just being in the wilderness is very liberating. And there's also a lot of, I think, just simplicity too. And so I think naturally then stress falls away. And I think that allows people just to feel open. And I think that the wilderness can be quite sexy and romantic. I think about the night sky, the stars, going on hikes, paddling around. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for really great conversation, which often is about connection. And so it can, not tends to always, but it can lead to more physical intimacy.
You know, the really neat thing is after hearing from Erin Peterson on this topic, it made me think, like, what is some of the brain science behind this, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what's happening in our brains when we're out in the woods, and why does that sort of lend to us feeling more sexual? I mean, have you wondered that?
I have. I mean, I've wondered that too while driving down the highway and checking the mail and taking a shower.
Yes.
Your level of, or a person's level of comfort in that space, I think, is a huge factor in whether or not nobody around for miles is, like a thing that makes you feel comfortable and therefore more like open to being sexual, or maybe it makes you really uncomfortable. And for me, at least, when I'm uncomfortable, that makes me feel like I want to put my walls up and shut down and not really explore anything sexually. So I think, it really depends on your level of comfort with not having people around for miles other than yourself or you and your partner, whoever it may be.
Anna really think, made it clear that you got to feel comfortable and relaxed, or at least she does, and I think many of us do, in order to start to feel sexual. Well, let's just think about some of the things that happen when you're out in the woods, right? Vitamin D, that totally helps your brain function. So you're immediately, like, your cognition is improving, but also natural light and the normalization of your sleep schedule, right? Like, you're awake and alert during the day and you sleep hard at night. And so that totally sinks the body into a rhythm. And I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that as soon as our cell phones and computers are out of the picture, holy cow. There's this whole study by the University of California, Irvine, just shows what we already know, that people who had access to their email, where they're receiving a steady stream of messages throughout the day, their heart rate was high and their stress was high. And then as soon as they went off grid, all of that dropped. Cell phones are gone, our brains are relaxing. And then the one that actually surprised me the most is something like paddling and camp chores actually lowers our stress hormone levels. So now we're relaxed, right? We're in a rhythm, we're using our bodies, and it's all of the same chemicals that we start to experience when we're getting into a sexual mood. Serotonin is this mood-boosting chemical that's only released during foreplay, and that immediately reduces stress. So it's like we're experiencing foreplay type sensations just by being in the woods. Isn't that wild?
That's great.
Yeah, and then of course we know, like, oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins, norepinephrine, those are all things that are either released during sex or during orgasm or after an orgasm. So when you take sex and combine it with all the things we love about being in the Boundary Waters, it's a perfect fit.
I asked Amy Freeman about that too, about why the wilderness is conducive for her as a place of sexual expression. She references that, but she also says you got to make sure that scale is balanced when you're out, especially with someone who's maybe new to paddling or going into a place like the Boundary Waters. Here's what Amy had to say.
In many ways, I'm probably more likely to be in the mood when we're out on a wilderness trip. So that certainly factors in. And I did want to bring up, though, in terms of making sure both parties are, like, on the same page, because certainly wouldn't want to ever, like, coerce somebody into doing something they don't want to. And for some people, you know, like, having a different comfort level with, you know, just sort of being out there in the woods, if one person's super comfortable with it and they're introducing their partner to it for the first time or something, it might be kind of overwhelming to suggest having sex. So you really want to kind of be in tune with the other person and not exert any sort of pressure in that regard.
Hi, I'm Ingrid Lyons. I'm the executive director of Save the Boundary Waters, and I'm that person who sends you way too many emails. But also, if you don't get our emails, you should probably go sign up. Save the Boundary Waters is a proud sponsor of Paddle and Portage. We work to protect canoe country so that folks can paddle in Portage in northeastern Minnesota for generations to come. Did you know that the Boundary Waters is America's most visited wilderness? Not only is it one of the country's most iconic and unique landscapes, but its 1.1 million acres of lakes and boreal forests offer something for everyone. People have long found inspiration and strength in the Boundary Waters, and now the wilderness needs you to speak loudly on its behalf. The future of this special place is at risk, threatened by America's most toxic industry, copper mining. Thanks for reading all the emails from us. I know we send a lot, but clearly there's a lot at stake for canoe country. You can make a difference. You already have. Join us in the effort to protect the Boundary Waters for generations to come by visiting our website at savetheboundarywaters.org to learn more.
Well, we've heard from all these folks and me now. What about
Brave souls. I tip my cap to you all for sharing your stories.
Well, I'd like to tip my cap to you, Freddie. Hear what you have to say on this topic. personally?
Whoa. Never think about it out there. I only think about fishing.
Oh, okay.
End of discussion. Next.
I'm noticing a little bit of inconsistency from you right now.
Yeah. No, I've had some wonderful, passionate experiences inside the Boundary Waters. During the winter, actually, is one that really comes to mind. And we were a romantic partner at the time, and I were ice fishing. Started out the morning ice fishing, but then going out and on the portage, and we'd take a turn up the Caribou Rock Trail, coming from Duncan to West Bearskin, to go up the Caribou Rock Trail, hiking up deep snow, feet of snow, and that's that steep part as you climb up there at the portage up that trail.
Absolutely gorgeous.
And we came to this overlook, a clearing. Could see way out almost to Rose, all this big expanse of Duncan, snow-covered pines, and the sun was out. It was probably 20 degrees, 25 degrees. The sun's out though, so it just made you feel warm and comfortable. And it was very early stages of this relationship, so it wasn't anything that would convey as sex in the traditional sense. We didn't have sex on this hillside, but we just nuzzled up to each other and held each other, and I put my face and nose into her neck area and shoulders and held each other, and we kind of moved back and forth in that rhythm and didn't talk much, and a lot of eye contact, and it was just better than sex, actually. In a way, it was just this connection in the Boundary Waters that was very sexual, and is just one of my favorite moments in the winter and in the Boundary Waters was on that hillside, and it was just wouldn't have been the same. Certainly in a city, even at the house or something, it had to be there for that magic.
That's beautiful. In fact, that reminds me exactly of something that Emily shared about being out in the woods.
I think that even though there's no buildings or other people, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself in a wild space anyway. And I know you and I have talked about this before, right?
Yes.
Traveling for miles and miles by yourself by any means. You can either A, choose to just distract yourself, music and thoughts and whatever. B, let the hard thoughts come and be vulnerable with yourself and where you're at. Or C, a mixture of both. And I think the same goes for wow, I'm really lonely, but also I really like to fuck somebody right now. Maybe that's myself doing that to myself, or maybe it's a person sleeping next to me. But am I willing to let myself be vulnerable in that state also? The wilderness always, for me, pulls that out of me to allow myself to be a little bit more, let that veil be a little thinner for vulnerability.
So far, we've been talking a lot about the celebration of sex in the Boundary Waters or wild places, or how it can be a great and beautiful thing. But there's also some practical things to think about too. Fluids are being exchanged, and there's stuff to think about in that regard.
Cleanliness, messiness, comfort, practically comfortable. Rocks aren't the most comfortable place to exist upon.
Embers shooting out at flesh.
Campfire ember, yeah. We have fire and rocks and water and earth and dirt. What do we do?
Well, we're going to hear from Aaron, the professional, about that, as well as Amy Freeman on some of that as well.
If someone needs birth control, prophylactics, especially in the Boundary Waters, you can't run somewhere and go grab a pack of condoms. So you want to be prepared. I think also maybe just being mindful of things like sunburn, bug repellent spray, I suppose too. Just, again, where you might be intimate, if it's somewhere that's comfortable to be on, or if you are laying down on some pine needles. So being mindful of, again, comfort for bodies.
Well, yes, so we definitely did take preventative measures, and I guess just for us, it's been various methods over the years. Like I was on a NuvaRing for quite a while, and so that's fairly handy for doing a trip like that because you don't have to remember to take a pill every single day, that kind of thing. It's something you replace like once a month, and doesn't require a doctor to like insert it, right? It's just you. So that's another thing that like just makes it simple and easy. And then of course, honestly, I can't remember kind of where we were at in terms of things for the year because we've kind of shifted away from that and just like using condoms and spermicide. And I guess kind of related to that, maybe choosing something that's a little less messy is handy when you're out on a trip like that. So when we spent the year in the Boundary Waters, we had a pretty big tent for just the two of us because we wanted to be able to accommodate guests, if folks did come to join us for a while, so we could sleep like 2 more people in this teepee tent that we were using. So when it was just the 2 of us, we weren't too worried about like bonking into the wood stove. And also, we weren't using cots, so like inflatable sleeping pads. And we always, in the winter, we also had a layer of foam under us just in case the inflatable pad died. But I think the key there is to create a nice warm space. So, you have your sleeping bags, nice thick warm layers, but it's a lot better if you have a heated tent and can, just kind of stoke the fire for a while beforehand so the air is warmer in your tent.
So some of these experiences that we've been sharing have been about inside a tent, or maybe when it's cold. My experience was on the snowy hillside in the winter. But it's the summertime now and paddling, and for us, when we get hot, sweaty on the portage, clothes are off, we're jumping in. When we were out with Shug that time years ago hiking on the Angleworm Trail, we got to the lake, stripped our clothes off, plunged into the lake.
Without saying a word to Shug, actually. He was quite flabbergasted. Respectfully so.
Yeah. Well, nudity is a thing that's just a little easier to do this time of year.
Yeah, but it also depends on who you are and who's around and even what kind of experiences sort of you had growing up around that stuff. I really appreciate what Anna had to say about that.
I love to feel those like warm rocks on my skin and spend a lot of time naked when appropriate, when no one else is around. It makes me very happy. And I think that even when I was a kid, I have like memories of skinny dipping with my mom and sister for the first time and like thinking it was just the most incredible feeling. And I think that was really important for me growing up, like in my body positivity of like feeling comfortable being naked in that like pretty raw setting is kind of the word I keep coming back to. And that has really translated for me into my adult life. So I still really enjoy a naked swim or a naked sunbathe on the rocks. And yeah, it's comfortable for me, and I think lends itself to like feeling like intimate and comfortable out there with Emily too.
So we've heard these stories, and all of them so far have been about shared experiences. And it's really important, again, to emphasize what Amy was saying about that has to be a welcomed, both parties have to be on board for that to be a good experience of sex in a place like the Boundary Waters.
Yeah, comfortable, prepared, and at ease in that environment.
Mm-hmm. But there are times when no one else is around. Maybe you're on a solo trip.
Some of the best trips are solo trips.
I love a good solo trip.
Yeah.
Even in the winter, a solo canoe trip, it's just a whole other experience in the Boundary Waters.
You know, that really gets at this topic that's been even harder to get people to talk about, which is sex with yourself. But you know who's brave enough to talk about that?
Emily Ford.
The one and only.
Yeah, masturbating in the wilderness alone? Sure. I mean, it's cold. Gotta stay warm somehow, and you're by yourself. So why not, I guess? Who's around to tell you otherwise?
Nobody.
Absolutely nobody. So I'll encourage it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably maybe would even be the best place to explore masturbation is out in the wilderness. Really no holds bar.
There's no...
Like, there's no wall for someone to hear you through.
Mm-hmm. And no door for somebody to walk in on.
That's right. You don't have to put a sock on the door, a rubber band on the door, nothing. Except for maybe you could put one on the zipper of your tent.
A little like purple ribbon.
Yeah.
Well, Freddie, we did it.
You know, speaking of that, for years people have thought that you and I do it.
Are you talking about like the sort of vague and potential rumor of us being sort of these rugged lovers that create a podcast together? Is that what you're talking about?
But you were somehow aloof to for years.
You just told me about this not long ago. I had no idea. Welcome to a completely different episode of the Paddle and Portage podcast.
Hey, and that would have been all good, but just to put it out there, as of now, has not occurred.
I like that you didn't eliminate it from possibility. You're telling me there's a chance.
You know how it is. I mean, the winter is long. Possibilities are endless.
You know, that's the most beautiful thing about this place. Whether it's a long, rugged solo journey or a slow, easy, base camping settle, possibilities are endless.
Mm-hmm. And I feel that when I look up at the night sky and look to Venus, look to Mars, our song, it's all that wonder and awe, all those possibilities, and sometimes it's good to just get lost in your thoughts of possibilities about experiences you can share with other people in a place like the Boundary Waters or when you come home. It's a healthy place to just let your mind, let your body be a little more free.
Can't think of a better way to wrap this up, Joe Fredericks. Thanks for sticking it out with us. We're pretty happy with this episode. And we know that there's a lot we still haven't talked about or covered. It's a big topic, isn't it?
Well, it's something that when we were in Ely recently, we were told there's two things that people think about a lot: sex and money. And they never really want to talk about them in a public way. It's kind of this like hushed, secretive type thing, or private, concerning, exciting. But we went for it in this episode.
One of the consequences of not talking about it is that those can become the most complicated or even problematic parts of our lives. So we started the conversation, and we want to hear from you. We want to know what you think, what we missed, what you want to hear more of. And of course, as always, we want to hear your stories. So send some feedback our way. That'll help us start to prepare for the next feature.
Yeah, you can message us on Instagram. It'd be a good way to find us on socials. You can email me directly, joe@paddleandportage.com. That's how you think. You can find my email on the website, but joe@paddleandportage.com. Or however you want to get in touch with us to share some stories, feedback, whatever it is. We've been getting some great feedback from members and just the people who are listening to the podcast recently. So keep that coming in. Love to hear the feedback.
We appreciate y'all. We make this for y'all. Let's keep it up.